welcome to the road to Dracula Vision's Artist Spotlight. Hey folks, so for more information, check out SlampressTomes on Facebook. Click the little button at the top, sign up for our newsletter where you'll get some behind the scenes updates on the project, some art that you won't be able to see anywhere else. Definitely will make it worth your while. I am once again, uh, proud to have Mr. Sam Noir join me today for our artist spotlight. How you doing, Sam?
Excellent, excellent. Our guest today is not only the hardest working man in the Toronto comic scene, he's also got the reputation for being the nicest.
That's true. So let's pull him in here. All right. So today's spotlight is on a painter, a writer, cover artist, comic illustrator, and the author of the best-selling book, Whenever You Do, Always Give It 100% Unless You're Donating Blood. The one and only Shawn Daley. How are you,
sir? How's it going? Thanks for having me on. And what an intro. Wow, thank you. A lot to live up to.
It's all 100% true, my friend. And great seeing you and Martin in the flesh this weekend at Gotham Central's Free Comic Book Day. Shout out to Carlos for arranging such an amazing live event.
Honestly, like everyone did such a good job setting. Like it was such a pleasure to just like see it. Mm-hmm. Everybody again. It's just been obviously it's such a long time. So
yeah, completely safe, completely outdoors, and I think the biggest event ever at Gotham Central. I think there were 1,200 people during that first day alone, minimum. So
yeah, it was wild. It was such
There was a huge line when I got there. So the format for this is Sam's going to ask you a few interesting and important questions. I'm gonna show up a few pieces of art that I've basically taken for the interwebs, Mr. Daley, and then when we get to about the halfway point, I'm going to get into some nonsense questions for you. So we're gonna find out what the real Shawn Daley is all about.
Oh, I love it. Maybe I'll learn a thing or two.
You'll learn something about yourself.
Yeah.
There we go. Well, I've always been fascinated, Shawn, by your journey as a comics creator, because you're actually your first love, if I remember correctly, is music, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. That's what I went to school for. That was the first type of art that I can remember doing growing up. So yeah, it was always music all the time, every day, and then that just kind of changed.
And even to this day, though, you're still a musician as well as a graphic artist.
Yeah, so I make music for independent games, but also just for myself, like for fun, just in my spare time whenever it comes up. It's something that has just never gone away, which I'm really happy about. Like I'm happy that I still kind of just do that for fun, even like whenever I can.
Mm-hmm. Now, is there a creative connectivity between your approach to music and your approach to art, or would you say you kind of sort of keep them as sort of separate disciplines?
Yeah, they're very separate disciplines, actually. It's kind of like uh, if I've been working on like visual art and comics for too long and I need a bit of a palette cleanser, I'll switch to music. And then it'll be vice versa as well. If I'm working on an album for too long of a time, I'll start drawing. And then that helps recharge, the musical energy, I guess you could say. And then it's the same thing the opposite way as well. So they're very different, but completely necessary for each other to kind of function.
That's understandable.
Yeah.
Now, even before you sort of quote unquote got serious about pursuing art as a career, prior to that, growing up, were you always drawing and doodling as well?
I do remember doing a lot of doodling on like my test papers in school, and just like exams and stuff. I would just end up, my mind would wander, and I would just start, scribbling like little doodles and stuff like that. But before I had started actually learning how to draw, I had never sat down and tried to actually like learn a thing or two about art and storytelling through comics. So. It just kind of, it was like an interesting learning process because there was no schooling or anything like that. It was just books and a lot of YouTube, actually. So.
Oh, wow. So it's safe to say that for the most part, you're self-taught. You were a comics fan, a comics reader. And then what made you decide to become a cartoonist?
I was reading so many comics, like so many. It was, I'm sure we can all relate to that. It was just
for sure.
never-ending comics. Like,
Yep.
You read 3 and you add 7. So it just it wasn't stopping. And I figured I was reading so many, and I had this love for just storytelling in general, and I knew that I wanted to tell stories. And because I was reading so many comics, I figured, well, why don't I pursue that? It seems to make a lot of sense. I'm reading a lot of them. I'm learning while I'm reading, so why not apply that knowledge to telling stories like that I would like to tell anyways. And I always knew that I had music as an outlet for storytelling, but it's such a different way to tell stories than comics, than any visual medium, really. So knowing that I wanted to work in a visual medium, comics seemed like the perfect fit. And it was, honestly, it's so much fun.
Which creators were the ones that most made you want to sort of pick up the pen, so to speak?
So guys like Jeff Lemire and Matt Kint, who are cartoonists themselves, who write and draw their own stories. This guy here, Akira Toriyama, who did Dragon Ball. Reading his work is just amazing, especially his line work and his inking. And even like comic strip cartoonists like Jim Davis, the creator of Garfield.
Yeah.
I grew up with, newspaper comic strips. I'm sure a lot of us did. And it was cartoonists in general, people who were writing and drawing their own work, who were, I think, to me, my biggest influences. Chester Brown, who has done a number of amazing comics over his career. So I would say like cartoonists in general and people like them.
And particularly, it appears visual stylists are kind of folks that really influence you.
Yes, very.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, just everything. Yeah, like a lot of. There's been a ton of different like visual styles that I've tried to pull from, but it took a long time of a lot of trial and error and a lot of fun, actually, just to figure out the visual style that I eventually wanted to work within. And it still feels like it's something that I'm discovering more about every single day. Like I still feel like I'm pulling certain elements from certain cartoonists' work into what I'm doing. So talking about visual styles, like that's something that it just always feels like it's kind of changing, like day by day with every project that I work on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, your work has certainly evolved, but I actually kind of think of you, in my mind at least, as someone who kind of came onto the scene almost fully formed in terms of his style. Again, your technique, your storytelling, it gets better and better each time. But in terms of the early work, like Terraquill, all the elements of Shawn Daley are certainly there in terms of what we think of in terms of Shawn, the Shawn Daley style.
Sure.
Was Terraquill your first work?
Yeah, it was. That was like the first thing that I had done when I had decided that I wanted to do comics. It was the project that I had started drawing, and I said, when this is done, I'm gonna get it out into the world in whatever way that I can, and depending on the reception, that's gonna kind of be whether I decide to move forward or decide to try something else. And it got a good enough reception that I'm here today talking with you guys, new stuff. So.
And this was self-published, and did it debut at TCAF? Am I remembering that correctly?
So it did debut at TCAF in the form of tiny little self-printed minis, almost like zine style, that I was essentially just handing out or mailing out to anybody who wanted it. Because the idea at the time wasn't to make money off of it. It was to say, hey, here's some comics that I'm making. Does anyone have any feedback? Does anybody enjoy them, etc.? So it was just a way to gauge interest, really, and to hopefully give some people some interesting stuff to read and think about. So yeah, that did debut at TCAF, but in very small zine forms. And then there was Kickstarter after that, and then the paperback debuted at, I think, Fan Expo, actually.
Now, did you set out to do a graphic novel? Did you have a story in mind, or did it evolve from these zines?
No, it was just these zines. It was just, I knew that because it was my first work, I didn't want to tell a very long story. I didn't want to tell like a 150-page single story, because that just seemed really daunting at the time. I didn't know what I was doing, at all. I had zero idea. And the idea of just starting one big long story, it was too much for me. So I said, I will do short stories instead. And then that's why Terraquill even existed, was just as practice for short stories, which eventually would lead into, learning how to write longer format stories.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I started small and then worked my way up, which seemed to be all right.
Now, at what point did you get picked up by a publisher?
That was actually with Samurai Grandpa. Easton DeVerna and I decided that we were going to try just making our own full-length graphic novel. And Easton is such an awesome writer and such a fun person to work with that, I knew that, we had to do something eventually. So he reached out to me and he asked me if I would draw this book. And he told me the name of the book. He just said, I have this idea, Samurai Grandpa. Done. Sold.
Sold.
I don't have to read this. I know I want to draw this. And
that's how I discovered you, actually, through that book. It just I think the name itself and the cover, I was drawn in instantly. This was right up my alley.
Sure. I mean, the name tells you kind of what to expect.
True.
Yeah. As soon as I sat down and read his script, though, I was like, oh, this is actually very, very good. So we drew the book, we kickstarted it, and then we had self-published a hardcover edition of that by ourselves, and then that got picked up by SourcePoint Press, who ended up publishing a reissue of the book as well as 4 individual single issues. So.
And this was your first major color work?
Yes, yeah, it was actually, yeah. I don't think I had done anything before then.
And what was it like delving into color after doing black and white stories?
It was something I always knew that I wanted to do. Actually, the very first story in Terraquill, in the book it's black and white, but the original art pages were all painted in watercolor. But I knew that the book wouldn't be color, so I reproduced them in black and white. But So even as early as then, I knew that I wanted to work in watercolor. And I had no idea what I was doing, like as one would expect for not, using paints like a day in their life. So, but I'm thankful that that didn't stop me, and I kept going with it because it's just become my absolute favorite medium to work in. Maybe even more than like just ink. If I could just paint an entire book in watercolor without line art, I would. I absolutely would. And maybe one day I'll think about doing that. But it was pretty wild to sit down and start learning about color theory and kind of the physics that go along with understanding how watercolor paint works. It's all very interesting. But again, I still feel like I'm learning something brand new with every single page that I sit down to paint or work on, which is good. Like there should always be something new to learn. I never want that feeling of, oh, I know it all. Like I don't need to learn anything more.
Now, in my mind, you're so incredibly prolific. I just think of you because, we encounter you at conventions, and then every time there's just a huge box of art, and you've got so many projects that are on the go. But you've talked here about a lot of trial and error. Are there a lot of quote unquote lost pages out there that you've sort of started, played around with, and abandoned? What's your process in that regard?
So you can't see it, but there's a huge box beside me, huge, filled with hundreds of pages that no one has ever seen.
Wow.
From books that were like start and stop books that just, but I mean, they're done. The pages are there. Maybe one day they'll, see the publishing world. But for now, they're in a gigantic box underneath my desk over here. So, I do have a lot of stuff that nobody has seen, but I don't know. I just feel like I can't really stop, and I just don't want to. It's it is my job to make comics. Like that is my full-time job, but it's also my hobby and something I love to do.
That's
so
great.
It's just it's
the dream.
It is in a big way, and I actually ended up taking the whole month of July off, just because I was so burnt out from nonstop comics work since like 2015, like just not even taking time off. So I took the entire month off, and that month without picking up a pen or a brush was almost more stressful than it is, like the nonstop grind. It was hard to. I'm glad I did it though, and I did do it. I was kind of concerned that like I wouldn't be able to, but and it was definitely
good.
As a visual reset. Now, where does this work ethic come from? Do you think you're absolutely compelled to draw, but on the flip side, how many pages a week, for example, are you able to put churn out? Well, churn out isn't the right word, but produce.
Close enough, yeah. I on a good week I can get 10 done, and
wow,
which isn't terribly bad. But I think a lot of that has to do with the style that I work in, because it is kind of it's a nice way to put this. It's a very unrefined style in some cases, where it's not as tight or as detailed as very many other books out there. But that style was chosen specifically so that I could work quickly, in addition to a few other reasons. But
more expressively as well. This is the one thing I've noticed about your work.
It's a lot of it is based off of older like European cartoonists who do work with a lot of ink and water, and they are very expressive in their lines. So I think that's where that might come from, is certain influences like that. But yeah, I mean, working fast does help with expressive lines, I think, anyways.
And sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
And you've had a good balance between, I guess, work from publishers and your own sort of creator-driven independent work, including the recent Kickstarter for Bridge Builders Creed.
Yes. Yeah. It's nice. It's kind of. I mean, we've never been fortunate, as fortunate as we are now, I think, in comics and self-publishing, because we can work with publishers. and we can self-publish, and we
Yep.
can kind of have the best of both worlds. There's no longer a need to choose one over the other, though if you do want to do that, you have that option, and that's great too. So we're just kind of like freer than ever to do what we want with comics. I think that's just my experience. But that's just kind of what I've noticed is, like we can kind of mix and match the way that we publish and distribute what we're doing.
And what's your criteria in terms of choosing a project for a publisher, for example, or going the crowdfunded route with a graphic novel?
To me, I don't really have a criteria. If I'm approached to do something, I look at my schedule and I say, is this something I can fit into my schedule? Is this something that would stress me out beyond belief? And I kind of go from there, you know? So there are a few defining factors, but it's mostly just like, what else do I have going on? Because to be honest, and it depends on where I am kind of in my life at the moment, because I may have all of these ideas for something that is very meaningful to me as just a person and as a storyteller that I want to publish on my own terms. And you can't always do, whatever you want when you're working with a publisher.
For
Right.
sure.
Yeah.
And go ahead.
Yeah, I just might have these ideas that are very close to my heart that I don't want really touched by anybody except myself. And in that case, I would self-publish, for example. But
that's fair.
Yeah, it differs project to project.
Now, what's the elevator pitch for Bridge Builders Creed? And tell us a quick rundown of your upcoming work, because you have a huge slate of work coming out, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a little bit on the horizon. So Bridge Builders Creed it's about an old bridge builder who lost everything in a war, and he's trying to rebuild his life, in addition to all of the bridges that were destroyed around the land that he essentially helped settle. I bill it as emotional fantasy because it is technically fantasy. It's a fantastical world that is based very much on many fantasy worlds out there. But it's ideally also supposed to tug at your heartstrings and to have you asking questions about your own life. So, and this, again, kind of what we were just talking about, it was a book that was very close to my heart because it was about all of my insecurities as a cartoonist moving off of the first book that I drew, which was Terrible. I finished that book, and I was like, the reception was pretty good for that book at the time, and I was terrified at the idea of having to reproduce that. It's like, I just put out a book. What do you mean I have to do it again? And what do you mean it has to be better than the last one? So all of my fears and anxieties about that idea were put into the characters of Bridge Builders Creed. So yeah, that had a great Kickstarter. It was a ton of fun. I learned a lot, and now that's out there in the world, and I have to do it again. So yeah, that will be interesting. On the horizon is a book called Better Place, which was written by Dwayne Murray. That's out by Top Shelf IDW in October, and I'm very excited about seeing that one on shelves. That, again, is a very personal story. I didn't write this one, but I had so much input. Like, Dwayne was so amazing about letting me just absorb the script, and put myself into it as well. So that's going to be another very emotional story that I'm looking forward to people reading. I think it should be anyways. And then there's more Samurai Grandpa. There's more Terraquill. Easton and I are working on a brand new book called Lost Souls, which actually I've just started all the artwork for it. So I've got some pages here.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's just starting to come.
You were working on that on the weekend, weren't you?
I was, yeah. This is where
I recognize those pages.
Yeah. So all of this
is that going to be a black and white book?
So
Shawn?
it's actually not, but these sections here were done in indigo monotone for a very specific story purpose. So we're actually using color to tell the story for.
Oh, okay. I've just noticed some heavy spotting of blacks in there, so
Yes.
that's very different than some of your more, I guess, open style.
Exactly. Yes,
art.
I'm trying to play with contrasts a little more in composition here. So, but again, that kind of goes back to what I was saying, where it's just always a learning experience, and things are just changing kind of book to book, which is good. Like I want to learn as much as I can while I'm working. So
very cool. Okay.
Yeah.
So are you ready, Shawn? So I warned you. I have 10 questions specifically designed to ensure we get a good psychological profile on you. I call this segment the process. So very simple, yet deeper than you'd think. So this is all would you rather questions. Okay.
Sure.
So number 1, would you rather end the life of a human being or 100 cute baby animals?
Oh my god. Really? What we're doing? Okay. Oh god, I'm damned if I do and I'm damned. Okay. I'm like, please nobody hate me, but baby animals.
This is the Kobayashi Maru.
Yeah, okay, baby animals. That's I don't even want to think about.
Wow. Okay. All right then.
I mean, yeah.
This guy.
Yeah.
Okay. So, based on your. All right. Would you? Sorry. Would you? I'm starting off strong on that one.
Yeah.
So much for Shawn's reputation. That's the nicest.
I will say that's not the most controversial one yet on this list. Would you rather have 3 arms or only 1 leg?
Oh, this is a way better question. 3 arms. Sure. Yeah, no doubt. 3 arms.
3 arms? You get so much more done.
2 books at once with 3 arms.
Or playing multiple instruments.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, there you go. All right, you can play keyboards and guitar. Would you rather know the lyrics of every song ever written, or be able to speak 5 different languages?
5 languages, for sure, hands down. That's definitely an easy one.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Would you rather have your brain transplanted into a robot or an animal of your choice?
Robot, for sure. Yeah, I think that. Yeah, definitely a robot.
Pretty cool animal choices.
There are some cool animal choices, but I don't know. To be a robot would be pretty wild, especially with like the technology that is coming out today. Like
That's true.
Yeah, definitely robot.
All right, robot. Okay, here's the most controversial one. Brace yourself. Would you rather legally change your last name to Hitler, or never, or never eat chocolate again?
I mean, do you know my relationship with chocolate? Did you pick this specifically for me?
Shawn Hitler?
I can't believe I'm saying this, but I wouldn't eat chocolate.
Okay.
I couldn't be Shawn Hitler. I couldn't do that. Does that include white chocolate? Is it like
chocolate?
Did you go on a shopping spree at Gotham Central, Shawn?
I should have, honestly.
Yeah, it's a great
my
stuff
God.
there.
Yeah.
All right. Would you rather be a superhero that no one knows or be a supervillain that everyone knows?
Superhero no one knows.
Superhero. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Would you rather own a horse or a bear?
A bear?
Yes.
A horse or a bear?
A horse or a bear?
Oh, a horse. Bears are one of my biggest fears of all time. Like,
okay.
Bears, no good.
See?
They scare the hell out of me. So
we're learning a lot about Shawn.
Yeah.
Okay. Would you rather have a giant tongue or giant feet?
I think giant feet would be kind of cool. Like you'd be a really good swimmer if you had giant feet, I think. Like you wouldn't need,
you'd have some problems though, like probably driving and finding shoes.
If you had a giant
like
tongue,
giant feet.
Eating. and then you'd be in a lot of trouble.
Ah, that's true. Depends if it's like a prehensile tongue.
That's true. That would be kind of.
All right. Would you rather have a partner that chews loudly or spits when they talk?
Choose loudly. I can deal with that.
You can handle the chewing?
Yeah.
Okay, and number 10, we're almost through this. Would you rather live in a world where you dance instead of walking, or one where you sang instead of talking?
Oh, sang instead of talking. That would be amazing. I think you might get sick and tired of it very quickly.
So basically, you're in a musical.
For sure. Fine with. I'm like kind of halfway there, anyways. So
halfway there.
I wouldn't mind. Yeah.
Awesome.
That wasn't bad, except for the 2 questions. And those were.
Those. You'll be thinking about those tonight.
Yeah, I'm gonna have some questions.
Very good. I will say that you did pass the test.
Okay.
But the last question I do have for you is, what is your favorite version of Dracula?
So I grew up playing a lot of video games. I say grew up. I still play a lot of video games. But Castlevania was actually my first intro to Dracula.
Nice.
And since like the Super Nintendo days back in the early
wow.
So,
he was so cheap.
For sure. Like that was the version that I grew up with.
Yeah.
And that is the version that when I close my eyes and I see Dracula, I see him from the games and in the art and the manuals and stuff. So I would say Castlevania. Like,
wow. I
wish that there were some new games in the franchise, but I'm happy to play the old ones and just have a good time with those. So definitely Castlevania.
He was so huge in that first one too. At the end, you get the big boss, and he's like a massive Dracula.
More than
yeah. And are you a fan of the Dracula Netflix series or Castlevania?
Yes. Yeah. The depiction of him there was incredibly well done as well. They kind of Mr. Freezed him, where they gave him this very tragic backstory. And almost you empathize with him a little bit, despite him being this monster essentially. So yeah, they did a really good job with him in that show as well.
Excellent.
Yeah, especially visually, like it's quite stunning. It's a very well done show. Yeah.
Well, I'm so happy that you said yes to be working on this project. I cannot wait to see what you're going to come up with. I think with the quote that you got or the part of the book it's ripe for interpretation. I think it's gonna fit well with your style.
I can't wait to show you what.
Awesome! I can't wait to see it.
Yeah.
And Sam, thanks again for having all the good questions.
Yeah.
And Shawn, you've inspired me to have my chocolate from Gotham Central.
Amazing. What kind of Kit Kat is that? That's,
key lime.
Oh man.
I bugged Casey Parsons for like a month every single day to pick me up a box of these.
That is amazing. Yeah,
I have a box of these over here.
That's dangerous, man.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
To dole those out.
Spotlight brought to you by
Key Lime
Kit Kat.
Send us boxes of it, Kit Kat.
That's right. Yeah. All right, folks. Thanks everybody for watching, and look out for more information on Dracula Visions. Look out for some more spotlights coming up. We have a Sketchelmania coming up, and we have a lot more fun announcements to come very soon. So check that out. Make sure that you subscribe to the newsletter again, just simply by going to the Facebook page, SlampressTomes, and pressing the button on the top. Okay. Cheers, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, Shawn. Thanks, Sam.
See you guys.
Bye.